cultural content. The students are able to move between their academic subjects and their cultural subjects. They see tribal elders in the school on a regular basis all day long. They can go down there and communicate with them. They can spend more than 90 minutes down there a day in those cultural classes if they want to. So it's a great model for folks that are interested in staying connected with that state system and the academic content, but being able to include the language and culture in a way that makes sense for them. Another thing about this school that I really liked was they have a student government structure that mimics exactly the tribal council structure. So in this setting, the students have the same model. The students, when they are elected to their student council positions, it's actually the tribal councilman's responsibility to come in and swear those students into those positions and go over with them what those job requirements are. And it's actually preparing those students to assume those positions when they get out of school. So this is a great model because what we want is those students to come out of those schools able to be contributing community members, able to work with their tribal councils, know their structures. Also in this after-school programs, the students are able to shadow tribal council members in the work that they do on the reservation. And so there's a lot of connection there. So that's a model if you want to see, if you want to do something that has that strong academic content with a state design and then a cultural model as well. And then the other one, the one that's up in Wisconsin is called Wadoka Dotting. And that one I can say because that was one of my languages. This is a full Ojibwe language immersion school. And this one doesn't have the academic content separate. What they have decided to do is have complete language and culture immersion and an organic, holistic pedagogy. This school has pre-K through 5 grades. It's located on the Lakota Ray Reservation. And the content, all of the classes are taught in the Ojibwe language with the exception of the English Language Arts class. So this is an interesting model. The students, although they're getting most of their content in their language and only the English Language Arts classes in English, they do very well on their state tests in English Language Arts. The students there excel in reading and writing. Among the 3rd graders, all of the 3rd graders received a 100% proficient in their English Language Arts state test. And some of them, some of them scored perfectly on that test. So that is a great model, and it's specifically designed for families who want their students to be very fluent in the Ojibwe language and culture, as well as getting some of that academic content. Another thing about the Wadoka Dotting School is it's very interdisciplinary in nature. So when they talk about this organic learning holistic model, they don't have math class, English class, social studies. They are all very they're interwoven, they're interconnected. They also have modeled a lot of their school design on the Native Hawaiian charter school designs, and they work very closely with those folks down there. So if that's a model that you like, you might want to be part of that network. They've got some great models and some great research down there, and they're really willing to help. So that's just kind of an overview of some of the models that are going on. I also wanted to mention a couple interesting things about the discipline. In the Wadoka Dotting one, for example, discipline in the school is more of it's a native-focused discipline. Instead of being a punitive model, the students work together. When they have issues, they work together and they'll bring in other teachers. The teachers here, by the way, are all fluent speakers, and they're all well-versed in the culture. So they bring in community members and their teachers to help them work through situations. So there's no suspension or expulsion going on. The students work through this process as a community. And when they're done with a dispute, if there was one, the hope is that they're working together and they're acting as brother a very nice holistic model. So why charters? We've seen a lot of these reasons that Native communities, tribes will look into doing charter schools. Certainly the interest in having control over the education of our Native students, having home, family, and community involvement. Because these are more like communities rather than school, where it's just a school building and that's all you do there is learn academics. Because these models are more holistic, we tend to have a much easier time getting the parents and the community members into the schools. These are cultural centers, not just academic classrooms. Cultural activities take place in the gyms and throughout the buildings. They're used in the evenings for cultural events and dinners. Certainly the inclusion of Native history, language, and culture, having caring teachers, and here we're not just talking about having caring teachers, but having teachers that really understand and relate to the students. That's extremely important, and when we have teachers that are actually fluent in the language, it's much easier for students to relate to them and see them as role models. Flexibility, we're talking about flexibility. The idea of the charter school, the purpose of the charter school is to think about new and innovative ways of teaching. We can be flexible in terms of our schedule. We don't have to have a regular school day. We can rethink that. We don't have to have 55 minutes for classes in a high school. We can rethink how we want to do that. We don't have to have math here, English there, social studies down the hall. We can have a holistic model if we want to. So it depends on what the community wants, what fits with the system. It doesn't have to be a Western-looking model. When I was reviewing the information for this, I looked at this study that was conducted, and the full study, by the way, is on NIEA's website. So if you go to NIEA.org, there's a menu bar that says research, and there's a drop-down menu, and it'll be in those pages there. But I was also looking at some other studies that had been done on charter schools serving Native students. And what I've seen is that it's not always enough to have tribal control over education, to have the increased parent involvement, caring teachers, all of those pieces that we're just talking about. We need to think bigger and broader about the kind of teaching we want. When we're thinking about discipline, for example, instead of having a punitive discipline model, what does discipline look like in a traditional Native community? We can implement that right in our classrooms. When we're thinking about attendance, we don't have to have the regular attendance system. I've seen some schools that allow students to make up time that they've missed. Evenings and weekends, over holidays, they can do that. And they do that with the help of tribal members. If they have missed schoolwork, I've seen some models where the community members come in and tutor the students to get them caught up again, so that they're not missing days and they're not being suspended or expelled because of attendance issues. Some of those are push-out issues. They're pushing our kids out of school, but with our charter schools, we can rethink how we want to do that. Another thing when we think about overcoming some of these Western ideas of teaching, in some of the schools that I've seen, teachers talk about the way they learn when they go to college tends to be the way they teach. So we need to think about what worked in our own education and what we would like to see done better. We don't have to stand in the front of the room and lecture to students. We don't have to have students raise their hand to get permission to answer a question. We can have a more organic classroom. We can have discussion and dialogue going on instead of a question and answer. The initiate, response, evaluate pattern is very common in our teaching in American culture, meaning that a teacher asks a question, the students respond with a correct or a non-correct response, the teacher says yes or no, or this is the correct response. Instead, we don't have to have that in our classrooms just because we learned it that way. We can think broader. We can think that students are not just empty vessels when they come into the classroom. They actually bring a lot of